Coming out to speak any moment. We'll, of course, take that live. The Dow futures already down 600 points. We will keep a close watch on that. But Ashley Webster, we'll bring you back shortly. The Dow futures rather down 600 and more is what they're saying.
Yeah, so you think about the Dow opens now in a little bit more than 9 hours, so the markets will have some time to digest what they've been seeing here. But as Ashley was pointing out, if you look at Shanghai, you look at Japan, the Nikkei index, you look at those kinds of things, you look at how the British pound is trading, there's a real shock that's happening inside the markets. And it would have been interesting to get this perspective, and we'll get it throughout the night, of the last time you had an event where the Dow futures were down 600 points was something like this. And for so long we had been saying that the idea of the UK voting to stay had already been factored into the market. So it wasn't like the markets were uncertain. They really felt, at least on Wall Street, that this was going to be a stay vote. When we would have said, okay, fine, what, sort of big deal here. And now, 2 hours before we thought we were going to even get official results, we have official results, and it's not what really anyone expected.
This could be something that we've never quite experienced before. We want to bring in Art Lafer, founder and chairman of Lafer Associates. Doctor, thanks for being with us. We really appreciate it. You're also a member of President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board for both of his 2 terms. First, sir, just your reaction. I mean, I think there's, as Ashley Webster was just saying, a lot of shock right now. We knew it was going to be close, but to know this soon, where you have outlets, including Sky News, saying that the UK has now voted out of the European Union, your response to that and just the impact of this, how big is this?
Well, I think the long-term impact would be very positive for Britain and for the United States. They made a mistake in going into the Union some 20 years ago, and I think this is a mistake that can be reversed, and thank goodness for Majors putting that as a provision for Britain joining the common market, is that they could have this vote and could remove it if it didn't work out well for them, and it hasn't worked out well for them, and I think it's going to be much better for Britain being out of the Union.
Take us back from a little sense of history. I want to bring our viewers up to date just so you know what you're looking at here. This is a feed from our sister network, Sky News. On the left-hand side of your screen is a picture of number 10 Downing Street. Remember, it's 5 a.m. or so in the United Kingdom. Inside number 10 Downing Street, David Cameron, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who fought hard on the Remain side. He staked his political future on it. He has now lost, and we're expecting to hear from him sometime shortly.
I'm sure he's awake at 5 a.m. following all of this closely.
I think this was an all-nighter for him. And the folks you talked to in his campaign up until an hour or so ago, very close confidants of Cameron, were positive they were going to win this. On the right-hand side of your screen is Boris Johnson. He is the former mayor of London, a Conservative member of Parliament who was one of the big voices in the Leave campaign. So you can imagine the 2 moods inside those houses. And
because we had an expert on earlier saying that there's a possibility that Boris could take on some sort of a leadership role from this if
easily
David Cameron has to step away. We'll
very
see.
Easily could become the prime minister. So, Dr. Lafer, bring you back. We talked about this earlier and sort of how history tends to rhyme every once in a while. And you had Margaret Thatcher come in and a real conservative revolution in the United Kingdom, shortly followed by President Reagan's election. Give us a sense, are we seeing this populist revolution there in the United Kingdom with this Leave the EU vote, and how that factors in to a Donald Trump candidacy who has so much staked his platform on the immigration issue that was a big part of the Leave campaign?
Well, I think the 2 are very similar. You're very right. I've spent a lot of my life in number 10, by the way. I worked with Thatcher throughout her whole term. And it's a very similar type of political movement, both here and in the United States. And, it's exactly the same with the other way, too. You had Thatcher, and then you had Tony Blair. Both of them very conservative, one equivalent of a Republican, the other one equivalent of a Democrat. But growth there, just like you had in the U.S. with Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, both of them very pro-growth, one a Republican, one a Democrat. And, you had this experiment done with W and with Obama. It hasn't worked here. And with Gordon Brown and with Cameron, it just hasn't worked there either. And you're having a reversion back to growth economics, which is exactly what we need in this world. We need tax cuts, pro-growth agenda, and we need spending cuts. And that's, I think, exactly where the world's going right now. And I'm very elated by what's happening, and I think it portends to a much better economy for both countries.
You spent a lot of time inside number 10. You spent a lot of time inside the White House as part of President Reagan's economic team. Give us a sense of what's going to be happening in the White House in the wee hours of the morning now and then going into tomorrow, as the president's economic advisors are going to deal with what is undoubtedly an enormous shock to the U.S. markets.
Well, there'll be a very short-term shock. I don't think the U.S. market's going to be down over the next 6 months, to be very honest, nor do I think the British markets are either. This is just a shock, as any change is a shock. And the White House people will have to deal in the short term with the markets being down, and so will they in Britain as well. But I think in the long term, this has got to be very disappointing for Hillary Clinton and for Barack Obama that their economics are being rejected, and just like they were with Brown and Cameron. It's the exact same thing, and it's a very exciting new era going back to Thatcher and to Reagan, which portends very well for the world economy.
And we saw President Obama there in the United Kingdom with David Cameron campaigning on the Remain side, and it was really stunning to see a U.S. president there involved in the economics there, and even sort of threatening a little bit to the United Kingdom, saying that, you know, if you leave the EU, you're going to, quote unquote, the back of the queue on any kind of new trade deals. And at least in the United Kingdom, they said, thank you very much for your advice, Mr. President, but we're out.
Right, a lot of fear-mongering that has played out. Art, you know, we talk about the huge economic impact here, but there's also a real national security impact at play. And the folks that I've talked to here in the United States that were in favor of remaining in the EU, they say this is very concerning because of our relationship with Russia and with the Iran deal, that the UK has played such an important role as part of the European Union to stand by the United States side. With them leaving the EU, how does this impact national security? How does this impact our relationship dealing with Russia, dealing with Iran, dealing with terrorism, arguably the most important issue we face today?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to affect our military relationships whatsoever with the United Kingdom. I think it will cause us to have a reevaluation of our global perspective on dealing with Russia and the rest of the world. That it will happen, and, you know, the Obamanomics and Obama's military policies will be questioned, and frankly, I think will be changed quite dramatically in the next administration.
All right. Dr. Laffer, appreciate you being with us, sir. Stay close, because it is going to be a long night of analysis here in terms of what the impact of this could be, as now we're watching the margin even widen. So Sky News called it as though is the United Kingdom leaving the European Union about 35 minutes ago, and that margin now has widened to almost 3 or 4 points there in the UK.
Just so much uncertainty about the impact and how big it will actually be.
Yeah, a lot of questions on that. A lot of questions on what this means for U.S. politics as well. Steve Moore, economic advisor to presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump, also a distinguished visiting fellow with the Heritage Foundation, joins us now from D.C. Steve, this is shocking in many ways, but at some level it sort of validates what your candidate has been saying for the past year.
I mean, in some ways, it really does, Leland. I think what you're seeing in Britain, I think you're seeing parallels to this in the United States, is a kind of revolt of the working class against the elites and the ruling class. And we're certainly seeing that in the United States with the rise of Trump and Trumpism, which really is a rejection of the policies of the last 7 years, and Washington telling us how everything has to happen. And I think the same thing in the UK. Yeah. You know, it's striking to me, Leland, that almost every single major figure in England and in Europe and even in the United States was advising the British citizens to vote against this, right? It was the media, it was the political class, the rulers, and so on. And the voters said, to hell with that, we're getting out of this because we don't think it's in our interest. And so I do think the parallels are rather striking. And I want to make one other quick point. I think the markets are overreacting here. They're hyperventilating right now, but I do not see this having a lasting negative impact. And I actually think, I agree with Dr. Laffer, I think for long-term growth and freedom, this is a positive development.
Stephen, why are they jumping so quickly? Are people just afraid of the uncertainty? They're just not sure of what's going to happen, how this is going to play out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the markets are interpreting this vote as a rejection of globalization, and I don't believe. In other words, I don't think this is a rejection of the global economy. I think this is a rejection of kind of global government. You know, people in Britain, when you talk to them, what they said is, we're tired of these nameless bureaucrats in Brussels telling us how we're going to run our country. The same way people around the country say we're tired of faceless bureaucrats in Washington telling us what time of light bulb we can put on our sockets and so on. And I just think it's a rejection against big government, and small is beautiful when it comes to government.
Well, the parallels, Steve, as you point out, are significant. Coincidence or not, Donald Trump, your man, is going to Scotland. He's going to be there for a couple of days, opening one of his new golf courses. You can imagine he might have a few things to say about this. Steve, stay close, because we're going to come back to you on the other side of this break. Dow futures down just about 600 points. There's nothing at all that markets hate more than uncertainty. And as we wake up this morning, there is a lot of uncertainty in the world. This could take 2 years to unravel. Unclear what it means for trade, for economic development, not only in the UK,
yeah, it's not just the markets, it's just people feeling uncertain too about what this means for them in their lives.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we will come back as the United Kingdom has said we're out to the European Union.